Hello and welcome to our series again. It's a pleasure to be here, and especially right now that we are passing a benchmark in our history. We passed the 4 million views, but I'm very excited as well with our community that is growing worldwide. So today I want to welcome to our series Dr. Jiaying Christine Jian. I think I spelled it terrible, but I'm particularly interested to welcome to our series, and she will pronounce her name properly, so apologize for that. I really tried. Dr. Jiaying Christine has a fantastic background, still quite young, but she's been working and involved in different initiatives, especially in the areas of blockchain and CBDCs, and in terms of law as well and research. So she's been Hauser Global Fellow at the New York University Law, co-leader of the CBDC project, cooperating with the China Center at Yale Law School, and the contributor to the RegTrax Initiative at CodeX, Stanford Law School. And she's been as well working in very high-profile research, especially when it comes to the areas of the central bank's digital currencies, but as well working in different bridges between law, fintech, and blockchain, and how this can be used by especially central banks. Our research has been more focused on Chinese central bank initiative of digital currencies, and as well in the US, where she's based as well, joining us from New York. So welcome to our series, Dr. Christine. I probably will say like that. I won't screw it up on that. It's an honor to have you here. Thank you so much.
Honored to be here. A brief intro. Thank you for the kind introduction. My name is Jiaying Jiang. You can just call me Christine. I think that's easier. I think my background is quite simple. Born and raised in China, and I got my first law degree in China, was admitted to practice law there. I think this pretty much sums up the first 2 decades of my life. And I moved to the United States in 2014 for my master's degree in law at University of Southern California, and later on a doctorate at Emory University School of Law. Currently, like Dinis just said, I'm a Hauser Global Fellow at NYU Law, and also working on a project called CBDC, cooperating with the China Center at Yale Law School, and also a contributor of the RegTrax Initiative, which is a law and technology in a law and blockchain initiative at Stanford Law School. And also a member of the bar in the state of New York. I think that's it.
It's very synthetic, but it's quite impressive, especially with all the names. You have probably some of the top universities in the world in the RCV, which is quite impressive, and congratulations for that. So before we go, and I would like to make, I always like to talk about the background, especially in terms of the cultural background and the different adaptations, because of course China right now is a powerhouse, is becoming the world leading economy and technology player, but of course the US as well is still the major economy. So we are between the two, and they've been bridging quite significantly that part. But what I'd like to do is, as you started in China and studying law, and then going to New York and studying law and the US, what would be the first kind of cultural shocks that you found, especially because law is very national and is very focused on the country where you are. But especially when you go to the areas that you've been going through, then you go to international law and you go for a lot of different dynamics. But I would like to have a bit of an overview about this kind of how do you bridge that studying in China and then go into the other one? Because I think it's quite interesting for us to get into that. And as well, you have a lot of expertise that is interesting to look at that.
Yeah, thank you for your question. To me, I don't think there is a real culture shock for me, because when I was in undergrad, 4-year law school in China, I went to different universities, either do a short-term study or exchange. For example, I went to Ukraine for a short time, do internship, and then I came to the United States when I was the 2nd year of my law school. And then I also went to Taiwan for the semester of exchange. So having been involved in different cultures, I kind of like very interesting how other legal systems are working. So that also inspired me to study abroad, and that's why I came to the United States. The first impression to me, well, at University of Southern California, it's very diverse, And at my program, which is LLM, Law of Masters program, we have 224 students at that program and coming from 42 or 45 countries. And I had great relationship with them. And a major difference, if you say in the class, is in China, we are pretty quiet in the classroom. But in the United States, I feel like everyone wants to speak, especially in the classroom. Before professor asks any question, the students raise hands and ask questions first. And that's something pretty much interesting, very interesting to me. So I really enjoy that. And we can talk about more legal and regulatory, backgrounds or legal, frameworks in China and the United States towards technology. We can talk about that later. Yeah.
No, I'm particularly interested on that. So, and I think one of the things that I think it's quite impressive is the relationships they've been having with all these different countries, which it creates a huge international background, because most of the lawyers don't have an international background. They have just local background, and law is normally very local. But before going to your academic achievements and as well the work you've been doing, so I know that you were an intern in the US Congress. So I think it's quite an interesting, especially with everything happening in the last months. But I would like to hear a bit, especially someone that comes from an education in China that ends up working in the US Congress. How was that experience, and a bit of some background? Of course, whatever you can put public. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Today is the inauguration day in the United States. Before our interview, I just watched Joe Biden swearing and Kamala Harris swearing as VP. And I was like, okay, I was there in 2016. And at that time, and I was at the office when Obama left the office, actually. About how I get an internship. You know what? I have been very curious how the legislative department work in the United States. So in 2016, I get a chance of a very kind professor who introduced me to the representative, Dinis K. Davis. He's the representative of Illinois. And I applied for internship and then got admitted. And then that was the first semester of my doctoral study. And I talked to my advisor. I said, hey, I got a very incredible opportunity, especially for the foreigner, for the Chinese. Can I go? Can I delay my doctoral study? my advisor, yeah, just go, because it would be a very incredible experience for you. So I went there, and Washington to me, to a foreigner, was very different. And when I was an internship there, when previous President Trump now get into the office, all my colleagues, they are Democrats, and they cried in the office. And I was like, how, can the change of a president can affect the people, the daily lives? Because that's kind of a shock to me. In China, we have probably different experience to that point, how the change of president would change people's life that dramatically. And my work at Representative Dinis K. Davis was to do research, and my research focused on education, because he is a representative focused on education, health, and a couple of other areas. But because of my background, so I focus on researching education-related bills. For example, he asked me to do a research on how African Americans, by the way, Representative Dinis K. Davis, he is a Black gentleman. He asked me to research how was the African Americans higher education look like at that stage, and what kind of bill is appropriate to propose to the House. So that's my major work there, doing research. At the same time, I was sent to different conferences or different briefings related to the education, especially African American in higher education. So, and I do the analysis, how it looked like, and then what kind of change should be implemented. And I also collect different briefings from different conferences, and then in the end submit a report to the Dinis K. Davis, to his office. And that's the major work I did at that time. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And it's a wonderful experience. But I think it's as well a great experience, like you mentioned, the cultural background. And I think that's what's wonderful about the experience of someone like you that has all this multi-global experience, which I think it's the most important thing for a leader for anything worldwide. So fantastic. And it's a great, as well, I think it's wonderful to show that as well for especially young people that are listening to us all over the world, that anyone can do it as long as you have the will and the
Yeah.
persistence to do it, which is great. So, so in terms of your academic work, like you mentioned, you did your PhD research and the postdoc as well.
Yeah.
So, can you tell us about that work, especially in the areas that you've been working in and as well? Well, let's start. It's probably with your PhD and your postdoc. Let's start with that because I think it's quite interesting as well.
Yeah, sure. Um, I think we are the generation growing up with the internet. Pretty much every day, we see how internet or other type of enabling technologies change our lives and change the way we do businesses. So I'm very much interested in seeing and understanding how law and technology foster, restrict, or otherwise shape each other's revolution. So my research, my main focus is law and technology, specifically policies and regulations on emerging technologies. I in my doctoral study, I study policies and regulation in the blockchain industry, and I take China and the United States as two case studies. Let me just give you a very brief introduction of my doctoral dissertation. I first conducted an exposed assessment analyzing how the existing regulatory regimes both in China and the US affect blockchain development and if the intended policy and regulatory goals have been achieved. And of course, my conclusion is part of the goals, regulatory goals have been achieved, part are not. So I then identified a few problems that still exist in the blockchain industry and that should be addressed and propose a few regulatory approach, including, let's say, command and control policy and self-regulation and intelligent regulation. And I kind of like conducted expose analysis using the method called regulatory impact assessment to draw the conclusion to see which policy is the best to foster blockchain implementation, especially in the financial market. And the one I propose, intelligent regulation, which is supported by sandbox, regulatory sandbox, and industry sandbox, as well as technology like Regtech, SupTech, to create a collaborative environment and technology enable scheme for better blockchain implementation. Yeah, I think that's a very brief introduction, and of course there are a lot more findings in the study.
And so these are actually the most important things because this touches so much different areas from a governmental perspective, from a even the way the different parts, because blockchain touches is holistic, is a foundational technology, it touches a lot of different areas. So from these findings, any conclusions that you want to highlight? Because I think one of the things that when you see, especially when it comes to regulatory part, is that, for instance, blockchain is seen like the big disruptor, but in the end of the day, it's about the details and about how do you look at, for instance, you mentioned sandboxes, you mentioned different parts of the blockchain ecosystem, but as well, all this part of RegTech, which right now is becoming the most important thing. So any findings in particular that you found that were interesting that you want to share with us, especially when it comes to the RegTech major developments in the last years, and as well the way you've been seeing the progress of the regulation around blockchain? Because blockchain has the part of the cryptocurrencies, it has the part of supply chain and all the smart contracts technology, and it has as well a lot of components of identity around data and around the documentation.
Yeah, sure. I think first, before we say like what kind of the model is the best, we need to look at the regulatory regime in that specific country. Although I study China and the US, but there's not one conclusion, one solution for all problems. So in China, the overall attitude of Chinese government is China support blockchain development, but at the same time, against go against cryptocurrency. So it's like pro blockchain, anti cryptocurrencies. So with this dynamic, China has been, especially China's central government and local government has spent a lot in, either funding or either talent support to blockchain related developments. And I think can give you a few data. Like until 2020 October, there are like 35,000 blockchain related patents that was filed in China. And I think that's a great progress. And a little bit different is in the United States, the policy or the regulatory regime is kind of divided. In the at a federal level, the SEC, Security Exchange Commissions, treated they don't regulate blockchain itself as a technology, but regulate blockchain related activities. For example, the application, the cryptocurrencies, and the SEC will see if the cryptocurrencies will be a securities, and if yes, then regulate the related activities. And CFTC treat cryptocurrency as commodities sometimes, and IIS see it as a property, so you need to pay tax once you have any capital gains through trading cryptocurrencies. And at a state level, I would say many states are very, very active right now. State of Vermont, state of Wyoming, and Texas. For example, in Vermont, they have the first DAO, the legal DAO, which is a blockchain-based limited liability company. And that was out probably in 2019. So you see there are so many different regulatory approach in both China and the United States. And I would say, because my main goal is not to stifle innovation. I do believe that blockchain is has great potential as an enabling technology. So what we should do is use sandbox to promote or foster its implementation in relevant markets. But the problem with sandbox is there are a lot of issues that you might need to address. For example, it's sometimes not very cost effective for the regulators, and sometimes it costs pretty. It's not cheap for regulators to come up with a sandbox, and usually it's like case by case. And there's another potential problem is for those companies admitted to the sandbox, they might have their leverage, and then it may not very equal to other non-sandbox companies that in the market. So if a country did decide to use sandbox, then you might need to consider, okay, what kind of a cost and benefit associated with it, and before implement sandbox approach. And yeah, I think that's a not very brief answer to this question.
No, it's very interesting, and I think you touch. I've been actually working with some regulators and as well very involved in blockchain, and I think you made a very good point between part of the blockchain technology, which I think is consensual, but then on when it comes to digital currencies and cryptocurrencies, there's still a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos, and I think then the sandbox. So I would like to go on this area as well. So in terms of in general RegTech, I want to come back to blockchain probably when it goes to the central banks, but on the RegTech in general, because you've been involved in a couple of projects on that. What have been, because in the last, let's say 5 years, the RegTech has been accelerating massive. And the RegTech, of course, touches everything. It's not just, it's much more broader. But I've been seeing a lot of changes, especially in the US and versus China as well, because I know that China right now, all the money is digital. It's almost impossible to have cash in China. Whereas in the US and even in Europe, a lot of places, it's mostly, for instance, I'm in London, and in London you can still do a lot of things with paper. And actually in some places they want paper. But for instance, if I go to Germany, it's even worse. In Germany, sometimes they don't accept. I had, for instance, a case that I had a problem that I had a taxi and they didn't want to accept my debit card, and I was stuck. I had to go to another taxi in the middle of, it was actually in a massive of a tempest. So what kind of bigger kind of developments you saw in the RegTech ecosystem? Because I think it's your ecosystem. Of course, you've been specialized in CBDCs, but just understanding your how do you see this progress and some of the research you did in general in terms of RegTech, which is the regulatory technologies.
Yeah. Yeah, let us be clear, a little bit clear about the term RegTech, regulatory technologies like fintechs using technologies to provide financial service, and legal tech, probably we will talk about later, is using technologies to provide legal service or provide access to justice. And RegTech is like regulatory technologies that specifically help like regulators to make this supervision process or regulatory process more efficient and more effective. Uh, I would say in China, right, this technology actually could be the same type of technology. For example, it can be blockchain, artificial intelligence, natural language processing, etc. Just because it's used for different purposes, so we call it different tech, RegTech, FinTech, and LegalTech. And in the RegTech space, and China right now, I think it's a few years ago, RegTech, the regulation start to in discussion at least that use blockchain to implement blockchain in the transaction in financial transactions. So some block so every transaction can be tracked real time. For example, in the case of CBDC, the regulations can, if you put let me be clear, CBDC right now is not on blockchain in China, but in our discussion, during the discussion phase, if we design that, okay, if CBDC is on blockchain, then blockchain can benefit regulators. How you regulator can be a node in this blockchain. So this is the idea of RegTech, how make this kind of regulatory oversight directly and in real time. This is one of the application. But in the end, CBDC, PBOC, China's People's Bank of China, which the central decided not to use blockchain in the CBDC system because due to the scalability issue. But I think this is the idea that how to use technology to make regulatory insight more efficient and more effective. That's one of the example here.
No, it's nothing. I like that you make the distinction because there's a lot of confusion around the topics. Yeah, amazing. So moving forward to, I want to touch a bit of your work with the China Center of the Yale Law School. If you want to just highlight that, because I think it's interesting to understand what is going on, and especially you've been working with Yale, Stanford, and as well New York University, so it's quite big universities. A bit of the experience in the different parts and the different schools.
Yeah, sure. My work with China Center is on studies central bank digital currency. We try to understand if a country, if it's necessary for the country to issue CBDC. If yes, what kind of principles are needed? And before we start this kind of to answer this broad question, we focus on we do case study. So the first case study is China, because China is at the forefront of this run. So and what we are doing is come out report on CBDC, China CBDC, and at the same time we also host a workshop that we invited people experts from the government, from academia, also from the industry to discuss CBDC. And I have to say that our report is out soon because this is a draft here. Sorry, you can see it. And I'm happy to talk about the research itself, the China's CBDC. And if you have questions regarding China CBDC, I'm happy to answer.
No, I have a lot of questions on that area. So let's go to the China CBDC. And I think before we go to China CBDC, because you and me are quite familiar with this, but for our audience, can you give a bit of context about what a CBDC is? Because I think of course this is kind of for people that are in the industry like you and me are kind of normal topics, but for our audience, I think it would be interesting to give a bit of context. So first of all, what are CBDCs? And second, what are the context of CBDCs in China in particular, and a bit on the US as well in the second part?
Yeah, sure. I think, Dinis, you are an expert of asking questions, and and I think it's very great for our audience to get the basic concept and basic idea before we start discussion. CBDC, this term itself is not well defined. the Bank for International Settlement have its definition. The IMF has its definition, and China's PBOC, China's central bank, also has its definition. So let me give you a general definition of CBDC. It is a kind of digital liability issued and guaranteed by the sovereign central bank that operates in a digital infrastructure with potential more affordance than the previous kind of currency like cash or like banknote or electronic accounts. So this is a basic idea of CBDC. In China, the CBDC is a legal tender. This is the definition. And why the country wants to issue CBDC? And let me I think there are a few motivations behind this. One is to reduce costs and increase efficiency. For example, the banknote, the US dollar, how much it costs to issue a print $1 bill is 7.7 cents. And how much does it cost to print a $100 bill? It is like 19 cents. So it's kind of expensive. And then at the same time, there are additional costs. For example, you need maintenance, take some money too, and also recycle of the cash also is not cheap. So one of the goals for these countries to think about CBDC is reducing costs and increase efficiency because payment can be made online and in real time, which is faster. And the second reason that countries want to issue CBDC is to prevent some illegal use of money. For example, with cash, a lot of things can do with cash, money laundering, tax evasion, terrorist financing. But with CBDC, because it works in a digital environment, every single transaction will have a footprint. So it will be easy to check. Well, both good and bad to this point. And third is to improve financial inclusion. Many countries right now, I'm not sure other countries, but at least in China, there has some population in rural area that do not have access to financial services that big people in big cities enjoy. So the good thing about CBDC is that it's a potential to improve financial inclusion by extending financial service to those people who are in disadvantage. So that's three or four major motivations that countries want to issue CBDC. But China may have similar motivations, but additional motivations. And if you would like to know, I'm happy to talk about China's CBDC and why China specifically wants to issue CBDC. Yeah. In addition to the 3 or 4 that I just mentioned, that I think that's kind of more universal. And China wants to issue CBDC, I would say, for one is to respond to the duopoly of Alipay and WeChat Pay. I think you have heard Ali and WeChat. They are 2 major mobile payment platforms in China. So, in 2019, there are 851 million smartphone users in China, and 86% of the population use mobile payment to make purchases. So the total value of mobile transaction in a single day was 52 trillion. So you can see a lot of people use smartphone and use mobile payment. But the problem with it is Ali controls 50% and Tencent, which is WeChat Pay, control 39% of the payment market. Imagine if there's something wrong with these 2 private companies, then what will people do? So PBOC, China's central bank has this kind of a concern. There will be certain kind of financial risks to have 2 private companies dominate the payment market. So PBOC would think, okay, it would be great for the central bank to issue this kind of a digital payment model to the general public. I think that's one of the reasons. And second, I think it's really the push of a Libra Association, which is now called DM. Think about this. If one country, if once DM is widely adopted in one country and the citizen in this country use DM as a payment method instead of using the currency in that country, what would happen? Central bank probably will, you will face the threat of losing control of tracking the financial activities of citizens and some financial data in its jurisdiction. So I think this is the concern that PBOC is very much concerned about, and the widespread adoption of Libra or DM or foreign CBDCs could diminish the use of the RMB. So it can also further undermine the monetary sovereignty of the RMB. So I think to prevent this from happening, China has been speeding up with launching China's CBDC. Yeah.
Oh, that's and I think you put it in a fantastic way. So one question I have related with that. So I know that there was announced that actually at the end of 2020 an entire regulatory part in terms of the CBDCs, which is probably the most advanced in the world. But going to what you said previously, so the concept is very different from country to country, and as well, there's not international alignment in terms of this. Even like you said, World Bank, IMF, and things like that. So from that, because in the end of the day, I love to quote Harari from the 20 Lessons for the 20th Century, Professor Harari from the University of Ivry and actually Global, where I mentioned, of course, the countries that will lead the data will lead the world economy. So in terms of your research, in terms of the CBDCs, and actually especially the lack of uniform concepts around the world, can create a huge, I always use the kind of fictionary parallels. There's a bit of a cyberpunk world where you're going to have, in one end, the very advanced technologies, people still using cash, and then a very fragmented financial, a bit chaotic system that I think we're going there right now. So how do you see that part, especially when it comes to your research? Because I think my point right now is, or we create a global currency and all the countries kind of a World Bank or IMF and the United Nations align efforts and the countries, which I don't think will happen because the countries are not very aligned. Let's see with Biden. But how do you see that, especially because at the moment it's really very schizophrenic, because you have Europe working on their own stuff, and for instance, I'm actually interviewing close in the near future the director. I'll introduce it to you, but the director of blockchain and actually financial strategy for Europe, and which is actually someone I know quite well. And the thing is that there's really a lack of consensus. So there's a lot of research, but sometimes it seems like everyone in there is in their own bubble. So I think, given that you are with the leading universities and as well having experience on this, do you see any capacity for us to create like a consensus around, especially the definition of central bank digital currencies, and having like a kind of an international, at least, alignment? Because in the end of the day, the forex transactions are, I think, is $4 to $5 trillion per day. So there's a lot of money going, and as well, this is the money that is really visible, but there's all the shadow money. So I just want to understand, how do you see this complexity of concepts, and even from a research perspective, because we have people in one country researching one way, and the other ones, and these universities that we're working actually probably the leading ones. So it's a big question, but I think it's important to hear your opinion on this.
Oh, well, I think you spot a real question that we are facing right now. Because the reason we do case study is we can find a consensus, we can find a central bank digital currency that can be applicable to all countries. That's why we start with country-specific research and we start with China. But with your question, if there is a potential that we're gonna have a global central bank digital currency, I would say at this stage, probably it's hard. At least for me right now, it's hard to estimate there is any country will be willing to give up their sovereign, monetary right to other countries. Like I say, China is very much concerned about what if Libra or DM is adopted in China? What if, let's say, if there is a digital dollar in China, or this digital Europe is adopted in China? I don't think Chinese government will like that. Similarly, in Europe, would you estimate that China's RMB is using in Europe? Are people willing to use that? I think at this moment it's very hard, and it's more of a regulatory issues, not only then regulatory issues, also as societal issues that people are probably not willing to accept that. So at this moment, it's hard.
No, it's a very good point, and I think so. One sorry, coming back to that, but so we know that it's not possible at least in the short term, but the technology is not stopping, and your research shows that. So, is the challenge is that, for instance, if you look, and now I'm going macroeconomics a bit out of the scope, but I'm more interested to hear in the scope of what you're saying. So, if you look at the world economy, of course, we're talking about in terms of terms around $80 trillion to $90 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
And this is more or less the official numbers. It depends on where you see. But for instance, we have on the top of the world economy, and this is a very, sorry, I'm going to, it's a very numbers question, but it has implications in what you're doing. So let's say if you're looking at $80 to $90 trillion, depends on what you're looking at that. But then if you put on the top of this, all the securities and all the trading that is going on the world, we're going to $200 to $300 trillion. I'm talking about securities and everything that is being trading.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have the digital currencies reaching 1 trillion. That as well. So we're starting to have a lot of fragmented elements of the world economy, and especially the world currencies, let's put it that way. And this is kind of a bit tricky because, for instance, if you look at most of the world economy, and you made a very good point, and I know that the Chinese government is right now going to Alibaba or whatever happens there, but not going to that. We have, for instance, Facebook, or if you put all the 5 or 6 or 7 corporations that are really more powerful in digital, they have more digital data, more digital capacity than all the governments in the planet. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So we are in a very crazy situation. On one end, we have the countries, and I think China is very wise, moving fast on that, which is the fastest one. But at the same time, we have all these complex players. I don't know if you thought about that, but for me, it's something that worries me as a citizen and worries me as a business person, because that means, are we going to have a new civil war where everything becomes chaotic? Or then you have to go through like a Cold War, where you're going to have all these different kind of each country for itself and things like that. I don't know, what do you think from a legal perspective? Because I know that your expertise is in legal and the technology.
Yes, like I just say, I don't think a CBDC could be applicable to all countries, but what I didn't say is probably like Libra, or I still call it Libra, DN could be this kind of stable coin can be applicable to all jurisdictions if regulators in that specific jurisdiction is willing to work with the association, with a DM association. That's a possibility. But in terms of legal aspect of it, I think I kind of like worry about data. Data, for example, Libra, just like you say, DM association holds more data than any other central bank in the world with its widespread, users in its platform. Same in China. You see, I just take China CBDC as an example. Data is still an issue. For example, who PBOC as the central bank, of course, have all sets of data with regards to CBDC account information, transaction information. But in addition to a PBOC, who has the access to data? How about commercial banks? Because in China, commercial bank and other financial institutions are the second tier, and that help distribute CBDC to the general public. So they will host some set of data with regards to CBDC's account information, transaction information. How can they make use of this data? Right now, Alipay and WeChat Pay, they have almost full control of consumer data. So they make a great deal out of it, analyze consumers' financial activities, and then put advertisement to make some profit. But in terms of CBDC as is a legal tender, who should use data and how to make full use of data? And credit, in China's credit system, is it possible that CBDC will use this to restrict some people's credit in terms of if they can get loan or not? That's a very serious legal question too. So that's my main concern: data and how to use it and how to restrict using data. I think that's one of the most important questions here.
Yeah, I think it's the most important question in the world, because it's all, I think, especially the next generations will have to deal with that, because it's data. For now, we're talking about financial data, but then it touches as well healthcare data. And actually, for instance, if you have someone that might have a potential disease, it affects the entire history of the person, and even it gets to a lot of more science fiction scenarios. But coming back to reality, and I think short term. So one question I have for you related with the CBDC, the Chinese Central Bank Digital Currencies Initiative. So from your experience and research, and I think this is not very well known, so people don't know exactly what has been done. So I would like to, if you could highlight like the major part of the initiative that was done, because unless you are an academic or researching this, people just know that China is very fast. I think that's what people know. And even people that are, I think sometimes I get a bit scared that even people that are in banking and in legal, they don't do their homework. So I think that's why I love talking with you about this, because you know exactly what you're talking about. So that's first part of the question. Then the second part of the question is, because China started, digitizing the entire economy. That means everyone right now is paid in mobile and in mobile money. So that means they have already an entire control, and they can actually have a control of especially the dark markets, or at least erase that part of the dark markets, which is a big thing in some markets in some countries. And at the same time, they can have starting having a bit, like you said, producing money is very expensive. So you can actually save millions of billions of dollars, because if you talk about all the notes in circulation of, like you said, $1 that costs £1 or close to that, or $1, and all the other things, it saves a lot of money, and as well a lot of control, because let's say if someone is doing fake money, which it happens in a lot of places, you have a lot of things. So there's two parts of the question. So one is the initiative of China digitizing the economy and making money really digital, so using mobile money, and as well all the regulatory part around that. Then second, a case study, or at least if you could explain a bit what was done so far in the Chinese central bank digital currency, at least the major milestones.
Okay, I think first I can give you a brief background about where we are right now in terms of CBDC. PBOC started research in 2014, very early, but I think big progress was made in 2019, right after then Libra Association launched Libra, which is now called DM. So I would say Libra 100% sped up China's experimentation with CBDC. And in 2019, November, the vice governor of PBOC announced that we have already complete the initial design, high-level design, and some major function testing of ECNY. And starting from April 2020, that was just last year, China launched trials of CBDC in 4 cities: Shenzhen, Suzhou, Chengdu, Xiong'an, etc. Working with Didi Chuxing, which is a American Uber. I'm not sure what's the equivalent in Europe. And people can pay CBDC, and also work with Meituan, which is a food delivery app with millions of users. So users can use CBDC to pay their meals. And that's April in 2014. And later in October 2020, the PBOC distributed 10 million CBDC to the general public in Shenzhen, and to 50,000 people actually who won the lottery, and then citizens there can spend at 3,300 restaurants and retail stores. I think let me see the data here. This is the result of the trial, that the week-long trial ended up with 8.8 million ECNY, which is US dollar 1.3 million, being spent over 62,000 transactions. So in 2020, China is planning to experiment CBDC in Winter Olympic, but we are not sure when China will you could give CBDC to the general public to use. So this is where we are right now. I'm sorry, what's your second question?
So the second question, I think you answered partly to the part of the CBDC roadmap. The other one is before that. So there was all a track record of digitizing the economy, especially using mobile money to pay things. So just a bit, because I think for Westerns that are not in China, people don't have an understanding how advanced China is, because China is I think probably a decade advanced compared to the rest of the world in terms of digital use of money and all the regulatory part around that. So a bit of that overview as well, if you can, a bit retro, before the CBDC, what happened to get to there? Because I think that's important as well to understand the historical part.
Yes, I can tell you from my personal experience, because I've been
Yes.
living here for the few years since 2014, and every time I go back to China, it's kind of like from the rural area and then go to a big city, like a country girl to a big city every time. That's how I feel whenever I go back to China. So I feel starting from probably 2015 or 16, China had Alipay and WeChat Pay has been, recruiting people to use its mobile payment. So whenever you go to a retail store, you just need to show a QR code without bringing anything with you, just a smartphone. That will be enough to pay whatever you bought. So people kind of like get used to this kind of payment method very quickly. And probably in 2019, 18, when I went back to China again, almost everyone that I know use mobile payment. I think that provides a good background for the PBOC to experiment CBDC, because all people have been accustomed to that. But the question is, if now we have a new one, CBDC, would the general public willing to switch from Alipay, WeChat Pay to CBDC? For the general public, probably not. Probably not that easy because they are already accustomed to Alipay and WeChat Pay. But as a government, you always have certain kind of power. For example, you can require the government officials, employees to be paid with CBDC. I think that's one way to do it. In terms of merchants, I think probably merchants have more motivation to shift from PBO's Alipay and WeChat Pay to CBDC. The reason is Ali and WeChat charge merchants some fees, but CBDC is a legal tender. You don't need to pay any fees to use it. So probably for merchants, they will be more willing to use it. And another problem with it is Alipay and WeChat Pay, they are two private accounts. So if there's anything wrong, the platform have the right to terminate your account. Then what's gonna happen? Very, very easy. You can just, if you have an Alipay account, then you just go to WeChat Pay. You can create another account, then you can use it again. But with CBDC, if your account was closed by PBOC, what am I going to do? It will be less options for the general public. So there's a dynamic here. PBOC has the ultimate authority to make this, make the public to use CBDC, I would say. Yeah.
Wow, that's a very, very good point and very relevant. So then going for right now from the CBDCs in China, which is very advanced and established, and like you mentioned, with very concrete deliveries. How has been your perception in the US? Because you are there and you've been as well doing a lot of research.
In the US, in the last workshop we host, and we also invite people from the Fed. And at this stage, and asked is Fed is going to issue a digital dollar, and people from the Fed told me probably at this stage, no, we're not at that stage, and US dollar is still the world currency. So I would say in the United States, experimentation with CBDC is kind of left behind, and yeah, I think that's how I feel at this moment. It's a kind of left behind, and probably Europe has more progress in that. Could you share some, progress in Europe? I know the central bank.
Yeah, the European Central Bank.
Central Bank is going to issue digital euro.
Yeah, they are already working as well in not as advanced as China, but there's Christine Lagarde has been very focused on that. And I know that there's a huge development right now. They've been actually there was a couple of research recently that was launched And I know that the European Commission has been, especially European Parliament, the people I've been working with, they've been actually advancing with a lot of things. So they have the basis in place. And I think right now they're trying to move forward to create a digital euro. Actually, there was, I think it was last month, or the last couple of weeks, actually, there was already some studies on that direction, and I think they're moving forward. But I'm sure that the Biden administration will go in that direction, because I think there's a couple of people very focused on the special digital currencies and understanding the importance of this. You cannot just stop it, because in the end of the day, everything gets digital. So the governments have to get. So very interesting points. And I think this is kind of amazing, because I think even for me, there's a lot of things that I've been researching, but unless you are really so deep, you cannot get it as you do it. So one of the things you've been doing as well is working in projects like the RegTrax Initiative at CodeX in the Stanford Law in the school. Can you tell us about that project? Because I think it's related as well for your research, but I just would like to hear what you're doing on that one.
Yes, RegTrax Initiative is a new initiative starting in 2020, I say, right last year. It's a law and blockchain initiative, a group of contributors and 3 coordinators. We are trying to we're trying to collect all blockchain related developments all across the world. Right now, we kind of focus on US, both at the federal level and state level, and also Hong Kong, Asia, and Europe. We have contributors from all across the world. And the first step, we are going to collect all relevant blockchain updates in this field, and then we're going to create a big database, which will be on probably in a month or 2 also. So do remember to check it out. And the second step, what we want to do is we want to provide insight, because we have a lot of experts in this field. So with this specific blockchain developments, what will going to happen. So we're going to have we are going to write blog posts, write analysis, write articles with regards to blockchain developments, and publish on RegTech websites. So and I think it's an education to the general public, and also probably we want to have a column specifically for lawyers or legal professionals to know like what's going on in the blockchain domain, and how to do legal analysis with blockchain development. So if you have any clients and wants to, for example, wants to establish a blockchain-based LLC, then what are you going to do? Like we're going to provide kind of consultations to them too.
Well,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, I have some ideas for that, and definitely I'll come back to you on that, because that's a couple of things that I'm working, especially in the areas of blockchain and smart cities, that I think very important. And I think especially one of the areas, and actually that brings me to the next question that I'm particularly interested in, is that, so when you look at fintech and AI, you touch a bit of AI, that's a huge component, because let's say if you have an entire country in a digital currency, and if you have then AIs, you can actually starting to have predictions, you can start having a lot of different things, and it comes back to data, but it comes back as well to the areas that you can actually create better engagement and empowerment. And you touch as well financial inclusion. So I don't know if you want to touch a bit of the work on the part of this, how this can affect financial inclusion. Anything you want to do on that, Eric, is an area very dear for me. So that was the first question I have here that I would like to do, especially following up on your answer in terms of the CBDIs and the CBDCs and the opportunities that are there.
So the question you asked me is how AI improve financial inclusion?
No, so I mixed 2 things, sorry. So let me separate. So that's 2 questions there. So the first question is definitely how CBDCs, if they get properly done, and as well, we can start incorporating then artificial intelligence, we can actually create a better legal system and a better situation. That is part of one, that is the question 1. And then the second is how you can actually look in terms of the CBDCs, in terms of pure financial inclusion, because you can get more data and you can actually get people more incorporated in the system, because a lot of people are outside of the system. And if you get them in the system, you can actually make predictions and avoid a lot of exclusion and integrate these people. Of course, it implies that people follow the rules, but a lot of other consequences on that. But we're talking from a legal perspective today.
Let me start with with the second question first, about if CBDC is done, that it probably can help financial inclusion. I can say from China's perspective, because China has always has a goal to eradicate extreme poverty, and in some rural areas, people do not have internet access, people do not have a bank account, and nor a smartphone. So how will you see CBDC should be run on at least on smartphone, and how will this work? So the first step is the government, especially the local government, need to provide smartphone to those people that are in rural areas. And I did a little bit of research. How does a smartphone cost? It's a little bit more than $100. So it won't be. I would assume it won't be a big expenditure for local governments. Once the smartphone is provided, everything will be easier, because the design of CBDC is, here's a very technical term, it's called loosely coupled account link. What does that mean? It means the transaction can be made between two digital wallets instead of two bank accounts. So you don't need a bank account to make payments or to make transfers. You only need two smartphones. And the transaction can be made offline. During the trial, two phones just like kind of bump each other, and then transaction is made from one phone to one digital wallet to another digital wallet. So this will greatly help people in the rural area without internet access. So I think that's a great way to improve their, and even though they don't have a bank account, they can still use smart CBDC to pay for whatever they buy. So I think that's a great way for them to enjoy financial services that people in some more developed cities enjoy. So I think that's that can really improve financial inclusion. Back to the first question. I'm sorry again. I need to
No. Sorry, it's a lot of. I sometimes my brain goes too fast, so I'll go a bit slower, and as well I think I will contextualize, because I'm actually engaging with your answer. So the second one is more in general,
Yeah.
as especially hopefully as CBDCs get adopted. We have access to a lot more data, and they can actually create a lot of predictions that can actually regulate the economy, regulate a lot of different things. And that is the part that I'm excited, but I know that there's a lot of challenge to go there. So I'm just asking, from your regulatory background ahead, how do you see this? Because of course, like you mentioned before, it's all about data, but it's about the way we make the bridge between the data and as well concrete case studies. And I think you mentioned sandboxes. This is key. So I just want to have your view. And then, of course, I think it's probably the question goes into the area of artificial intelligence, because of course, as we get more data, the regulatory part has to interact with that. So it's a big question, but whatever you can take out of this, yeah.
I can make a brief point out of this question. In terms of the data we have, one particular idea in my mind is whether we can, come up with certain kind of like credit assessing mechanism with this data. Because let's say if everyone use CBDC, so every transaction, how you spend money will be recorded, and then PBOC will have a set of data then PBOC will know who is accredited citizens, and then I think certain kind of like credited assessing mechanism can be built on this data. So it will be helpful, but at the same time, it's also lack of I would say freedom. I would say, because with cash, you don't necessarily do illegal things. You might just don't want to disclose your financial activities, and I think cash can be a good way to do that. But with CBDC, there's no that kind of choice. So you'll be less freedom for the citizens who do not necessarily want to commit some crime, especially commit some financial crime. But I think this, in addition to this point, another thing is you also related to monetary policy, I would say. Once the PBOC have clear sense of how each money is going to spend, every RMB is going to expend, PBOC may have better access, to impose monetary policies in real time and get access to the liquidity of the RMB. I think potential this is very theoretical. At the theoretical level, it can help it can help monetary policy to be implemented. So that's another point.
No, amazing, and I think you touched all the points.
Yeah.
So I think we passed 1 hour, so I know that it's been very intense things here. So I will just wrap up. So I think I just like probably coming back to the AI in my last question, and then I want just to listen as well about your stuff. So as we get all these different technologies, especially in fintech, and as we get most of the world economy digitized, and you touch the implications from a privacy perspective, but there's implications from a regulatory perspective as well. And as we mentioned before, the challenge is that if this is all done on a global consensus is okay, but at the moment it's done in a very fragmented way. So do you see as well, especially when it comes to, let's say, for instance, during the Brexit, I'm going to give you an example. During Brexit, for instance, the pound crashed because one algorithm in Hong Kong that was trading big quantities of pound realized that the Brexit would be bad for the UK economy. So the pound just crashed massive, and it was very bad. But the algorithm decided that it was not people; it was an algorithm because most of the trading in the world is done on that. So how do you see these kind of complexities on the technology side, the regulatory part, and then the real economy? Because I know that your research is looking at case studies, but you understand this as well in a different angle. So I don't know if you touched this, but it's for me one of my main concerns. So the confusion between the regulatory part, the technology that doesn't stop, and then the real economy that is much more complex, and the real politics and so forth.
I think I will see your question from this perspective. How technology, especially enabling technology, artificial intelligence, blockchain, involved in the real economy. Yes. I think I can say from the legal perspective, and how I can see how AI and technology affect law, either at a theoretical level, how you affect legal research, or how you affect legal practice. As a background as a lawyer, I think I'm probably better to answer this question than the real.
No, I'm asking from a legal playground because it's your expertise, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I can give you my experience to see how artificial intelligence affect legal education and also affect legal practice. For example, at a very theoretical level, with the development of AI, blockchain, and all these technologies, it raised a lot of questions for legal scholars. And some scholars propose that we should have a new discipline, a new distinct field of legal study called tech law. Some schools call it computational law, And in the United States, I think Stanford has a computational law project. MIT also have a computational law project, and in China, specifically Tsinghua University also has a computational law master program. And very lucky, I talked to the dean of Tsinghua Law School and asked him, what is the computational law master program, and what are you going to teach, and what students are going to learn? He said computational law, the new discipline is going to study first how to respond to legal questions posed by emerging technologies. See, there are, for example, autonomous vehicles. There are so many questions, either legal question, ethical question, and how to address this question proposed by emerging technology. This is one of the big questions that this discipline is going to address. And second is, from a methodology perspective, computer science, big data analysis, natural language processing, this kind of technology can be a new method to study law. It can become a method. And third, computational law, it has a goal. Computational law project can, have the potential to bring understanding and bring legal tools to everyone in society, not just to legal professionals. So it would help, access to justice. At a practical level, technologies at AI and blockchain, all these technology have definitely bring a great impact to the legal professions. For example, we just talked about LegalTech, e-discovery tools, And document automation tools has greatly increased the efficiency of lawyers' work. And the most recent developments of AI in the legal domain include process automation, document review, project management, and due diligence and legal research, etc. And court, of course, and it also impact court and online dispute resolution. For example, China right now has 3 internet court. And these internet courts are dedicated to resolving internet-related dispute through online litigation platforms. And also, China is the first country in the world that legalized the use of blockchain to authenticate evidence. I think that's a great progress and how it affects the real court, the evidence rules. And also online dispute resolution. For example, Alibaba has a Taobao, which is an e-commerce giant with 721 million monthly users. This platform streamlines dispute through its internal dispute resolution system. As you can see, e-commerce in the US, I use Amazon. So what are the common disputes? The item sent was wrong, or the item sent was delayed. So this kind of common dispute can be streamlined in its online dispute resolution system. And then Alibaba came out with a series of resolution plans, such as quickly refunding or replacing items for the customers. Ultimately, 95% of these disputes are resolved through the internal process, with only remainder 5% going to the internet court. And all I'm saying is that technology has greatly impacted either legal practice, and legal education. And I think this also we will see this in the future, more impact.
Well, fantastic. I think that one is great. And I think probably I want to have another interview on that. But I know that you probably need to rest. And it's been fantastic. So I think I want to thank you because it's been amazing. And your level of knowledge is quite impressive because you touch all the different areas and with a very sharp incision way. That's quite amazing. And especially on these things, I know that it's very complex subjects as well. So I appreciate your generosity of time and as well intelligence and knowledge. So I just as a last note, do you want to just tell the people listening to us where they can find your research? We're going to put it, of course, with the YouTube channel in the interview links and as well in the different websites we're using. But it's just coming from you and eventually some notes from the university research. I know that you have multiple social networks, but where can people find your research and the main areas?
Yeah, I think my works are mainly published on DataView. I have a book chapter published by Cambridge University Press talking about technology and the future of legal education and legal practice. I think that's out. That will be out this year. And then soon, I think Yale will publish the report that that my partner and I are working on regarding CBDC. So you can find it online or at Yale website. And in terms other some academic work, I publish it on SSRN, and or you can find my personal information at NYU website, and then there are some more additional information there. Thank you.
No, I appreciate. So we'll put all these links and thank you so much. And well, I really appreciate. I've been learning as well some things myself, and definitely I'll come back to you for more insights about this. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. And I have learned a lot and I enjoy this interview very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.